Hello and welcome to this special Thanksgiving edition of Future of XYZ. Thrilled to have two guests with us this week talking about the future of children's books. Kelly Ann Manuel is a children's author. She's published 31 children's books under 4 different series, which is a fascinating model. And Stephen Joseph was an attorney turned children's and adult book author with crazy titles like Snoodles, Cadoodles, Poodles, and most importantly, cranky superpowers. Thank you both for joining us on Future of XYZ.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. This is fantastic. So excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to dive right in because as all of our listeners and viewers know, we don't have a huge amount of time. And this is a big topic. And it's an exciting, happy topic in a world that is not always so exciting and happy these days. So you guys get to bring some joy in right before the Thanksgiving holiday here in America and just before the holidays in general around the world. So let's talk about what children's books mean. I mean, there's a definition that's pretty obvious. It's a book for children. But through each of your lenses, how do you define it? And Kellyanne, I'll launch it to you first.
Well, sure. I initially and immediately go back to my own childhood and the books that I read and the stories and what they did for me and for my imagination. And they were integral, including the library. I used to be taken to the library for story time. And those stories are woven into the fabric of my being. So when I think of stories today for children, I want the same thing for them. So it's the idea that they become a piece of your history and that they show you a view of the world that may not be available in your immediate house, home, community, apartment. So they open windows. Books are windows to the world. And without them, especially in childhood, it would affect your development. And so the more you have, the more development you're going to have, and the more excitement you're going to have, the more dreams you're going to have. So that's how I see children's books. Yeah.
I heard stories, imagination, exposure, opportunity. It's like, that's pretty big. Stephen, what do you think?
Well, I could go back to my childhood, but if I go back to my childhood, I go to like Mad Magazine. So that's what I remember, and Cracked, which is like the competitor for Mad Magazine. But I go back more to when my daughter was small. She's like 28 now. So I like to get into characters and be very fun with the books. So the books actually had to entertain me as the adult as much as I want my daughters to be entertained. So, and it shows in my books when I'm writing as much for the grown-ups in a room as for the child. And it's more about, again, with creativity and thinking outside the box, being kind of like loony, but still having a message. That's always important for me.
I appreciate that. I was having a conversation with a friend just earlier today, and she was describing, she has an 11-year-old, and she was describing what screens are doing, that he used to love to read, and now he's on his screen a lot. And I wasn't intending to go there right away, but with these themes of imagination and of creativity and of, being exposed to different things, it's different than when you're watching like a TikTok 20-second video or, something. And I'm not anti-technology. I don't love screens in the same way that it's made me ADHD and unable to consume an adult book in the same way I used to. But I'm curious, about the role of technology. And then I'll come back to kind of like thinking about the questions I wanted to answer. But like as we think about today versus yesterday, and now certainly as things are expanding in the future, how do you guys see technological evolution impacting the future of children's books?
Well, I could take that. I know one of the amazing things, Cranky Superpowers, which is my latest book, and actually it's a book as much for adults, more toward adults than for children, but I've heard that there's a lot of stories actually for children. But one of the amazing things in that book is that every chapter, so there's 37 chapters in the book, in every chapter, there's some illustration in the beginning of the book. And they're amazing illustrations. And people ask me who did it. And I say artificial intelligence. So, and going through it, there's a couple of clunkers, but then you just give artificial intelligence whatever instructions. And some of them is like, wow, it's like really amazing. So I could see artificial intelligence taking over. And I know when I'm writing a kid's book, I have an illustrator, and I do the story blocks. And I describe what I'm looking for in the illustration, and my illustrator, Andy Case, does a phenomenal job. But I just curious, if I gave some computer my thoughts, what I'm looking for, the computer, I mean, I would never replace Andy. He's irreplaceable. But I'm curious what a computer would come up with.
I think it's coming for all of us. I appreciate that perspective. Neither of you was trained as an author or a writer, and neither of you certainly is a children's book. What drew you to this genre?
For me, it was I just started writing in March of 2022. And I started writing poetry, and I heard the poetry. And I just knew immediately the poetry was meant to be translated into nursery rhyme format. My books are about modern day nursery rhymes. So if you think of a Hans Christian Andersen, somebody I grew up with, along those lines. So they came as poems, but I knew they were for children. And I did work with children in the preschool arena in teaching and in administration. So I did have a piece of my background that does align really well. But I had no intention of it. It just really presented itself. I say I heard the call and I answered it, and I just knew these stories were important, and that the timing was important, and that rhyming. So, anybody with children in their lives, rhyming is huge for literacy development, and for this time of their life, rhyming is huge. So that's across the board. If you can involve rhyming into their learning, that's going to give them a leg up.
And that's more like kind of like baby to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8. I mean, Stephen, you're writing for around the 3 to 5 and older. Is that fair to say? And obviously older being also us grown-up kids.
Actually, yeah, no, my book's more like 6 to 10 to 12 to 99.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I appreciate what Kellyanne said. I know as a kid, I loved rhyming books. I loved the words rhyme. I loved to play with the words, and it takes you into a whole world. And when you're reading a rhyming book, you kind of listen. You want to listen. You listen inside your head, even if you read it to yourself. If you read it out loud, there's glee, there's joy. Just hearing the rhymes, having fun with it, and it paints a picture more so than if just telling a story. So I love the rhyme. I mean, there's rhymes in my books. Every snoodles, canoodles, poodles. So. Yeah,
and as you said, it makes it fun for the adults. Also engages the adults who are reading to the kids. Also,
that's right. And I again, I'm like Kellyanne. I'm an attorney. I still am. I have my day job. So I wasn't planning on writing a children's book. It was all by accident, and it just so happened I was in Rome with my wife in the Airbnb. And with the electricity went out just as she was dyeing her hair, and black dye went into her eye, and she was a little cranky. And I said she was like a Tyrannosaurus, and I used the word saurus, which is the Yiddish word for problems, saurus. And I said that's how probably all the dinosaurs died. There was this one little dinosaur who kept cranking out her saurus, so all the other dinosaurs couldn't take it anymore. They all dropped dead. So And so then I came up with a story how all humans evolved from this very cranky dinosaur. And that's why when babies are born or crying, we come out cranky. And I started on this cranky theme. So there's, adults getting cranky, children getting cranky. So it's every time I think I'm tapped out in the cranky genre, there's more things that come out of that. And it's fun.
I love that. I mean, it's quite fun. I mean, I can just imagine the conversation that happened. I mean, there's something very much about in children's books that we see ourselves as adults, or we have to, or we want to have the fun that we maybe had as kids, that inner child kind of development. But I'm hearing kind of what makes a successful children's book it ultimately is entertainment, right? And so that's the illustrations, that's more and more interactivity, the graphic novels, the whatever, certainly the unique voice that both of you guys have. And I think all successful children's books authors bring to the table. As we think about other trends though, because I feel like, especially it's interesting, both of you are relatively new authors. There are books, by people who stand the test of time, Cow Jumped Over the Moon, storylines. And as you mentioned, Hans Christian Andersen and, Dr. Seuss, there are a number, right? But there are also a lot of you who are writing books, and it is actually a surprisingly fast growing segment of the market with CAGR that's, just surprised me as I was researching this. What do you attribute that to? Again, in competition for so many other forms of entertainment, what do you each of you guys think is driving growth in the children's literature category?
I'll go on and say the connectedness. Children's books bring connectedness that the child desires, that the caregiver desires, that the family member desires. So I believe because it's physical, and living and breathing, in my opinion. So it's a connector. So if you don't have that, you have a lot of independent experiences going on. So the book is the bridge. So if the bridge is entertaining, fun, funny, and then maybe if there's something to learn on the bridge, that's even better. But the bridge itself is the thing that I believe we are wanting, and that is always going to be a draw and a successful item to want for, whether you're the youngster, whether you're the teenager, whether you're the adult or the grandparent, any age. The connection is so important. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I agree. I think there's a connection, and I think there's a difference between what you might see on the screen and or what you see on your computer, that sort of thing, where there's something detached about it. And when you have the physical book, and I know with my book, I have a lot of fun characters. It's almost like a level when you could hold the book. Like I have the book. It's almost like I could go out and buy a bunch of dolls, and you have the doll, and you want to hold on to. A kid wants the doll because there's that physical connection, and the book it's not a doll, but you look at the pictures, and you see they jump out off the page, and it's almost the same kind of relationship that a child could have with a book or a doll that you really can't have just like staring at a screen.
And what about, I'm just going to push on this because I know audiobooks are a huge growing segment in adult literature, but also in kids literature, because busy parents can avoid the screen but still have their kid reading. And obviously there's some kids who have learning disabilities where they take it in orally, through acoustically better. What's the story, however it gets in, is that imaginative quality. That's ultimately what I'm hearing, is that connection is to a world outside of yourself as well.
I've actually converted all 31 of mine into audio, and they are incredible. So the idea is driving for a holiday visit, right? You can play one of the audiobooks. And then I do really in-depth synopsises. So you can discuss it. The whole idea is to discuss what's being read and what's funny and, what's ironic, right? Is how we both write. There's humor, there's irony, there's satire, and it's meant to be a leap pad for discussion. So if you're in the car, some people can't even read, they get cart, whatever. Audio can be very helpful. And, there's children that's really how they process is through audio. So I do think it's important to have the option, if you can, of both, plus the theater of it is truly incredible.
I love that. Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
I really would love to get I have my adult books in audio. I don't have my kid books in audio, even though I think it would be so much fun. And I actually was on a recent podcast just the other day and she knows my voice, where she's like, oh, you should do like the audio with the different characters. I actually hired somebody else to do my audio for the adult books, and he did a great job, but there's so many characters that lives inside me.
Exactly.
Maybe I should have done it. And
I think that's something that's so fascinating. You just mentioned characters and just sparked something for me. As a kid, I mean, forget even as a kid, as a grown-up, when the Harry Potter books came out, to me, this was the most remarkable gift of imagination. And when the first movie came out, I really resisted seeing it because I knew it would change everything. And when I went, I had the opportunity to go to the New York premiere with my former boss's daughter. And it was so fun to go. But I mean, I was saying Hermione and it was Hermione, and Quidditch was something totally different in my brain. And you never get back to what you had in your own imagination once someone's told you what it's supposed to look like. And I don't have the same feeling with audio. It's just, it's, as you guys said, it's a production, it's fun. And Stephen, I can totally imagine all the different characters, that live, as you say, inside of you, and getting them out is such a fun exercise. So it is a very, I think it's quite a different thing. But that's a personal feeling. As we look at like trends, let's just call it, like, what are your editors, your publishers, your readers demanding? Like, what are the things that are changing that you think in the next, has happened quickly and over the next 5 to 10 years are going to continue to evolve as far as content within the books, the stories themselves?
Well, I think people want a story that they could learn something without being told. I mean, I see a lot of kid books, children books, like how to use your manners, how to do this, how to do that, how to behave, how to, like, it's almost like, like feeding you without really much of a story to it. It just has the moral to it, how to behave, and it doesn't have much substance to it. And what I try to do in my book is take you into a world, and it's hysterical and it's funny and the characters are so interesting, but there's a message that is so important that I want people to get, that they could take out from themselves. And actually, there's a few messages in my books that people, depending on how you read it, you read of certain things that really speak to you, and it comes internally from you, not externally at you. And I think there's a lot of books that got coming at you, and so in terms of trends, I think people want to read those books that they could get something internal, that they could, you read like Harry Potter, and it comes from you inside. Like the voices they become you, and I think that's why Harry Potter was so popular. It's your own voice, but they give you the words, and that's empowering. So that kind of book, I think, is what people like to see.
Kellyanne, what do you think?
I would definitely agree with everything that was just said. And, I would just add a lot, I feel, writing from the voice of the inner child to the child is what is needed and is what is being responded to, as opposed to the adult. I think Stephen and I both operate from this inner child space, or inner teen, or young adult. And when you write from that draws the reader in, and they can relate, and it resonates. And it's just like a Harry Potter book. It talks through the inner child. So I think that's gigantic when it comes to and then permission, so much about permission to emote, permission to feel a certain way without being, like Stephen said, without being told, right? You can bring up topics in gentle ways without telling the child.
Yeah. I think what you both are saying is something about, and I think it's true, the best children's books reflect what's happening in society and culture, and help kids to some degree make sense of it, right? Without, again, preaching or dictating. So, I certainly recognize growing themes of, diversity, equity, inclusion. So people that you don't necessarily see, right? Like that authenticity of the storytelling of, I worked on a big media project last year, and it's talking about representation in front of and behind the camera, right? And I think this is coming up in kids' books, as is social justice and sustainability, and these themes that are much more meaningful to bigger society. But Stephen, as you said, without preaching, hopefully. Are you guys feeling pressure on that front to make sure that there are educational, whether it's STEM, whether it's mental health and wellness aspects, or do you think that there's still this inner child, just straight up, empathy, fun that there's room for in this space?
There's room for empathy and fun, and I know when I write, I really want to have a message too in there. So after this last book, my last Noodles in Space book came out, my illustrator, who loves drawing this stuff, goes, "I would write for free, and you better write a story. I'm going to go gangsta on you." And I told him I can't write a story. If it's just, I could write a story, but it has to be about something. And then the light bulb lit up, and my next book is like a takeoff on Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but making the bad kids the heroes of the book. And that's about shaming. You can imagine, when you think of the story of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie's
Veruca Salt.
Yes, and you have the good kid, Charlie, and everybody loves the good kid, but these bad kids, maybe not necessarily bad, or spoiled, and they make bad decisions, and things don't turn out too well for them. But if you remember the movie, it was a media circus. And I can imagine what was published the next day about these poor, maybe spoiled kids, and they're shamed. So my next book, I have Frippy Frumpy Fruital and Whippy Wumpy Woodle going to Chucky Chockadoodle's chocolate factory with the Schlumpadoodles, and then they end up, Frippy Frumpy has a Fizzy Wizzy Papadoodle, and Whippy Whiny has a Swizzly Twizzly Slimadoodle. So Frippy Frumpy pops, and Whippy Wumpy turns into a bucket of slime.
Oh my goodness.
And
kids love this.
Yeah. So, but they become heroes at the end, and they save the planet, of course, and when they get the keys to the city, all the other students in the class who might have not looked at them so kindly are applauding. They're all there cheering these two kids who were shamed initially because of the media circus, that they're heroes.
That's wonderful. I want to I'm very cognizant on this program, unfortunately, of time, and we're there. So I want to just do a quick, the last question I always ask. This is it's a slow moving industry, but it's changing. and you guys are both on that forefront of kind of the next generation of children's books authors. If you look 20 years into the future, what is your greatest hope for what is this children's literature is going to look like?
I sure hope there's a lot of well-worn paper books.
Thank you.